The Research Policy Network on Fintech and Digital Currencies has an ever-expanding list of issues for its researchers. But what's top of the list for central bank and government policymakers, and how can the RPN influence their decisions? Hello Dirk, welcome. Great to have you on, and congratulations for taking over the RPN.
Hey Tim, how are you?
Good, thanks. Now, Dirk, the big focus for many of the economists who are attached to your RPN in 2021 is central bank digital currencies. I noticed that Stephen Cecchetti described the debate about these on Vox EU as an epic battle for the soul of the financial system. Crikey, is it really that important?
Well, I think it is quite important. What many of us, including Stephen, I believe, are pointing out is that this is not just a technology question. It's not about one app or one payment rail replacing something else. It's rather that the introduction of retail CBDC would fundamentally change the monetary architectures. And that's not only in developing countries, but really also in developed economies. So what is at stake here is much more than technology. It's about the division of labor between the public and the private sector. It's about government revenues. It's about competition. It's about the trust that people have in government money. It's about too big to fail regulation, many, many more things. So it's much more broader than just monetary policy.
In the past, it was very much a debate about whether they would happen at all. But now I noticed that China's going to issue its central bank digital currencies. So does that mean it's sort of game over? They're effectively inevitable everywhere?
I think many people tend to have that view by now. Neither the US nor the euro area want the role of the dollar or the euro to be taken over by some other major currency. So there's other incentives in play now than just the pure narrow monetary policy objectives. Now there's a debate going on among researchers in international finance, what exactly it is that leads people to adopt a certain currency for certain purposes. But it seems clear that if you offer a very flexible and convenient means of payment, like some of these novel CBDCs possibly could be, that could shift, the range of adoption across currency areas. And it seems that this is really on the radar of policymakers in Washington and Frankfurt. So I think it is an issue, yes.
The debate amongst researchers that you refer to, it's very interesting going on at Vox EU at the moment. Not complete agreement, you have to say as well. Now, outside academia, the debate on how these are going to be introduced seems to have been driven by the central banks. Should governments be getting more involved in that, or should they say that's monetary policy and stay away from it?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, actually. And right now, as you say, it is mostly central banks that are leading or dominating the discussion here. And I'm not sure that's the way it should be. Because whether retail CBDC should be introduced or not is really not just a question of technology, as I said, but also just of monetary policy. It's much broader than that. It's a question about what monetary architecture is the one that we want to use, given that we have these possibilities, these new technological possibilities these days. And that question is beyond the turf of central banks, which are mandated to do the best they can within a given monetary architecture, but not about designing the monetary architecture. So there's a different level of debate that we have to lead at that point. So I think the final verdict on that question, whether we want to introduce these new instruments or not, really has to come from parliaments, or here in Switzerland it would have to come from voters, presumably, but not just, in quote, from the central bank.
As you say, there's some pretty important decisions to be made here on the architecture. How can the RPN contribute to that, get some traction in the decision-making process?
Yeah, I mean, there are many groups involved at stake here in that discussion. So what from the RPN side we have to do, and I think that that people involved in that have been doing for a while, is not only contributing to the public debate as we are through walks and other means, But at the same time, getting in touch with policymakers. Some of the members of the RPN are actually policymakers, or they are close to policymakers. They are advising them. So I think that is the way to go, as usual for economists. If you want to have some influence, you have to talk to the people in charge, or at least you have to try to affect the public debate. So that's what we're trying to do as well here.
This is partly a hot topic because of the pressure from cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin especially. There's been a lot about those on VuxEU and from the CEPR. Are you also going to be paying attention in the near future to the so-called stablecoins? I mean, specifically Facebook's attempt at that, which I think now they're calling DM.
So you're perfectly right. A lot of the interest in CBDC actually comes from the debate that everybody's following in the news these days about cryptocurrencies, which is in some sense useful for us because it steers some interest. At the same time, it's very confusing because there's no fundamental link between these two things. Actually, these are totally different issues. Potentially, there could be some links on the technology side, but not even there. So this is really different stuff that we're talking about. And I think members of the RPN and others, of course, have tried to make this clear in the past and will probably also do in the future, but the message has not necessarily come through with all journalists and people interested in the topics. Now, regarding stablecoins, you're perfectly right. This is another very important issue. They are much more similar in some sense to CBDC than cryptocurrencies per se. At least if you think of stablecoins as the real ones, which would be stablecoins that have assets which essentially are government liabilities, then the stablecoin could pretty closely mimic a CBDC with some caveats. And people work on that, clearly think about this, communicate this. So this is an important issue that RPN members do pay attention to indeed, yes.
One of the reasons why this is so important is that the big techs and the fintechs, they have a regulatory advantage now over old-fashioned banks, don't they? Do you plan to investigate how to create a more level playing field, or is that more about law than it is about economics?
So banking, indeed, these days is basically more about managing a database, and that's it, right? But managing a database, many people or many firms can do, and actually many newcomers probably can do better than traditional banks, and that's what we are seeing right now. They might come from different angles, having managed different types of data, but they know very well how to manage data and make money with that. So in that respect, given that these newcomers are less tightly regulated as of now than the traditional banks, they indeed have an advantage indeed, yeah. And this advantage is probably temporary in the sense that regulators will eventually catch up and make sure that there's sort of a level playing field. But given that banking is an industry with increasing returns, so once you're in, I mean, there's lots to be gained of expanding scale. And there's network effects and these kind of things. There's a good chance that some of these entrants really will consolidate their market share, and this will have permanent effects for that reason. So these are things that are very interesting and important. And I think members of the RPM have that in mind, do pay attention to that. But as you suggested, there's lots of regulatory legal questions involved with that. Now, we do have also legal scholars, or at least one, if I remember correctly, in the RPN. So there's a lot of emphasis on potential benefits from collaboration, and we are trying to use that to exploit that. Yes.
So we're all set for Stephen's epic battle over the next few months, couple of years. What can you do within the RPN to attract the attention of, I don't know, the generals, I suppose we could call them, who are going to be fighting this battle?
Well, we rely on you, Tim, for that, of getting the message out, and we are certainly also trying to get an ebook out by the end of the year. Let's see whether we'll manage, but that's at this point certainly the objective. So hopefully we'll get the message out.
Well, good luck with that, Dirk. I mean, you've got plenty in your in tray, haven't you? So I'll let you get on with it, but thanks for talking to me today.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks so much.
So look out for an ebook on all these issues and more coming from CEPR later in 2021. And meanwhile, you can keep up with all the activities of the Fintech and Digital Currencies RPN using this link.